All right, and then we'll get going. Just welcome everyone. I'm Mariah Fogg, the Community Conservation Manager with the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. And this is our, I believe, third annual wonderful winter outings with BNRC Zoom session. So thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by my coworkers, Charlotte Hood, who's the volunteer and outreach assistant with BNRC, and Rich Montone, the director of fundraising. I see a lot of familiar names, but for those of you who aren't familiar, the Berkshire Natural Resources Council is a donor and volunteer-supported regional land trust, actively working throughout Berkshire County on land conservation, land stewardship, and community engagement. BNRC conserves land to protect water resources, wildlife habitat, for climate resilience, and to connect people to the natural world. So I'm going to pass it over to Charlotte now.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming tonight. I just have a quick land acknowledgement. So it is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are the indigenous peoples of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Munsee community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. To learn more, visit mohican.com. Now to Rich for an overview of the hour.
Yeah, so here's what we're going to do this hour. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're going to start off by talking about where to go to get outside in the winter in the Berkshires. All the spots that we're going to talk about over the next hour are free. Excuse me. So we'll start with some classics, and then we'll move on to some places that are less trod, some suggestions outside of the winter classics that we have on BNRC reserves around the Berkshires. Then we'll talk about what to bring, so you know what you can have with you to make your experience easy and fun and safe. We'll also talk about what you can look for out there in terms of what's going on in the woods and on the mountaintops and in the fields of the Berkshires. We can share tips with each other, and you can hop in to ask questions anytime, and we'll wrap the whole thing up by 5 o'clock. In our experiences with these things in the past, the hour goes very quickly. So we'll get started. So starting off with where to go. New and improved, I think, is first. And I think, Charlotte, you're starting us off, right?
Yep. All right. So first up, we have Thomas and Palmer in Great Barrington. That's 270 acres. And we have the half-mile Meadow Loop Trail. Oh, Mariah, I don't see the screen right now.
I'm sorry.
The presentation. No worries.
How about
But I
now?
really need it. Yes, I see it.
Let me try and make it full screen. I'm sorry about that. There we go.
No worries. All right, here we go. So the half-mile meadow loop is accessible with a gentle slope and gravel surface. As its name suggests, this trail loops through a beautiful meadow and wetland complex. It's full of goldenrod and milkweed, which can be just as beautiful in the winter as in the summer. As you can see in the photo here at the top, there's a lovely bridge crossing over a stream and huge sugar maple trees in the pasture. As of summer 2022, so last summer, there's a new trail at Thomas and Palmer, which offers a very different experience. You can see part of it in the lower right-hand corner. And it's a 2-mile out and back called Whale Rock Trail, and it gradually climbs up to a unique rock feature called Whale Rock. Along the way, you'll be walking through a hardwood forest with trees such as chestnut, oak, birch, and cherry. Lovely reserve, highly recommend.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. So the next reserve we'll highlight is Steeple Top. It's in New Marlborough and is currently BNRC's largest fee-owned reserve that BNRC as an organization owns at 1,230 acres. There are 5 miles of marked trail with many more miles of unmarked wood roads for those who are adventurous and want to explore further. There's a wonderful variety of habitats. There's wetlands, small meadows, older and younger forest. You've got black cherry, sugar maple, red maple, a lot of evidence of old foundations and stone walls as well. And one of my favorite things in winter about this area is you often see sightings of otter slides because of those wetlands. They're just having a good old time going from wetland to wetland. This is also a reserve that is a favorite for cross-country skiing. There's not a ton of elevation change, so it is fairly beginner friendly. Most recently this year, our stewardship team repaired a bridge on Louise Lane, so that's the improvement, as well as added some bog bridging to help really keep folks' feet dry, more so in the spring season during the melt, but this is really to support some of the changes we see due to the adjacent beaver pond. So Steeple Top, add it to your list if you haven't been there.
Next up is Basin Pond in Lee in the eastern central Berkshires. Great reserve here, Basin Pond. It's about 300 acres in size, and it has 2.5 miles of trail. I'm really glad that for this year's winter outings online event, it's in the new and improved section, because for quite some time we've been trying to help people have an easier go of getting over 2 stream crossings along the trail. And so what used to be places where you would sort of carefully navigate rocks that you could put your feet on in the stream to get across the stream crossings, we now have actual bridges, which makes this reserve much more accessible to many more people. And it's a great place with a great reward on the loop trail. So, you know, definitely glad that those bridges are there. There's very cool rock features along this route, and there's a great overlook platform where you can have a rest and check out the beaver wetland when you get there. This reserve also abuts the October Mountain State Forest, which is the largest state forest in Massachusetts at 16,500 acres. So there's plenty of wildlife running around out there, and it's good to know that Basin Pond helps extend the reach of the October Mountain State Forest even further.
Right, now we have some winter classics. The first up is the Hoosick Range. I'm sure some of you have been here before. For those of you who reside in Pittsfield, it's definitely worth the 40-minute commute. It's one of BNRC's largest reserves at nearly 1,000 acres, and it offers 6 miles of trails ranging from easy to difficult options, but all of which have excellent lookouts and vistas, offering views of North Adams and the Green Mountains and even the Taconic Range over in New York. All along the trail, you'll see trees and bent and by the stress of the wind and ice and snow. Because of the elevation, you can almost guarantee winter time conditions up here. So be sure to bring your snowshoes. In these photos, it really is a winter wonderland when they're good.
Thank you, Charlotte. One of my favorite things to mention about the Hoosick Range is, you know, when we do get some good snow, there's often a lot more snow up there, like Charlotte mentioned, and sometimes you have to look for the trailblazers below, you know, not at the height you would expect. It might be below your knees, for example. So just something fun to keep in mind when you're up on the ridge. All right, so the next trail system we're going to talk about is the High Road, Yoken Ridge, and connecting trails. For those of you who aren't familiar, the High Road is a long-term major conservation initiative of BNRC that is made possible by generous donors and land partners. The High Road plans to make connections from towns to trails and along clusters of conservation land to better allow hikers to explore more of the scenic Berkshires. Yoken Ridge extends from Pittsfield to Lenox. It's a very iconic ridge line and one that a lot of folks are very familiar with and also hosts the home of the first high road route. So the next couple points I want to mention are kind of the access points and some of the allowed uses. So Mahana Cobble is, the Mahana Cobble Trail is kind of at the northernmost point of Yoken Ridge and is also the home of Bosque ski area. The ski area has been a great partner in this effort because historically there wasn't winter access to Mahanacobble. And so even during the active ski area, there's signage to help guide hikers safely up to Mahanacobble. Mahanacobble Reserve itself is 222 acres, again on the north end of Yoken Ridge. The Mahanacobble Trail is 3.2 miles out and back. It is considered difficult because the first 0.3 miles are on Bosque ski area. So you're climbing up a ski slope. The bedrock, I feel like, is a great highlight on this trail. It's schist, so it's really shiny. As long as you can see it through the snow, it adds a lot of value in the wintertime. At the top of Mahanacobble is a vista and also George's Bench. George Waslocki was the founder of BNRC. You get incredible views from here. One of the only locations where I think you get, you can't see any development from a vista. So you're looking over at Kennedy Park, Pleasant Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, Yoken Ridge, all the way south to the southern Taconics. And your approach back down, if you don't continue along the ridge from there, your approach back down really gives you a nice bird's eye view of Pittsfield and the North Berkshires. And then a plus now is you can get refreshments at Bosque, warm up by, the fire outside. And one thing to note about the use of this area is there are no dogs allowed during the ski season at this time. So if you were to continue on Yoken Ridge, the next section you would get to are Yoken Seat and Lennox Mountain, all on Mass Audubon land. Both of these vistas offer really expansive views facing towards the Taconic Range and the Richmond Valley. And then if you were to continue on south, there's Yoken Ridge South. Most folks know it as the Olivia's Overlook option, but it's a 734-acre reserve owned by BNRC, 6+ miles of trails. With Olivia's Overlook, there's even a great view from the parking lot. You're overlooking the Stockbridge Bowl. On this network of trails, you're going to see a lot of hemlock trees, which is a nice contrast with white pines as well, and then a more typical northern hardwood forest. One thing that we often hear from folks is that you often see snow conditions that are different on one side of the trail system than the other, just due to the wind and those patterns. Something else to keep in mind while you're there, and really anywhere, but a lot of animal activity. We see evidence of fisher, coyote, fox, deer, porcupine, all those good things. And the other access point beyond Olivia's Overlook for Yoken Ridge South is the Brothers Trailhead, which is actually the primary entrance for the continuation of the high road route here. I'm not sure, can you see my pointer on the screen right now? You can. Perfect. All right, so we'll just walk from Bosque all the way up to Mahanacobble, touching on Mass Audubon's Yoken Seat and Lennox Mountain. And we're going to continue along the ridge through the Lennox watershed land all the way to BNRC's Yoken Ridge South. And as you can see, there's quite a network there, but the Old Bald Head Road to the Brothers Trailhead is the access point for the high road route that can also connect you to Krippalo. So a lot of options there. And this is just a
Mariah,
yeah, go ahead.
Do you happen to know, if you walk from Bosque to Krippalo, what the approximate mileage is?
Yes, I believe it's 8 miles. And that information is on our website. Mm-hmm. So pretty good winter walk.
I did it last season, and it's definitely possible. We were doing it in the summer, so it was a little toasty. I think in the winter, it would be a better fit.
Yeah, spotting a car at both locations really makes it feel more manageable. Awesome. So these are just a sampling of some of the things you might see on this route. The far left photo is on the Burbank Trail at Yoken Ridge South, overlooking the Richmond Valley. There's also Monk's Pond, which is a prominent feature at Yoken Ridge South. And I was just there the other day, and there was just glassy ice over it, and it was dark green and just so beautiful. And then the last photo is tracks It's one of my favorite things. So these are bobcat tracks, and you can really tell because the heel pad has two lobes, which really creates an M shape, and a good way to remember M for meow. And there's also no claw marks. So just something to keep in mind when you're looking for tracks out there.
All right, so next up is Bob's Way in Monterey, which is a beautiful property of about 260 acres. There's 2.5 miles of trails in here with several different routes that you can take on a somewhat of a figure-8 trail system. You'll see mountain laurel, and there's great contrast with hobblebush. There's also maples and beeches and birches and oak. And there's also a beautiful wetland marsh here. It's really big. Sometimes you're lucky enough where you can spot a beaver doing its work out on the wetland marsh. There's also a high point that you can climb to that has a stone bench that you can sit on and enjoy a bit of a vista. It's a good place to have a snack or a sandwich or something of that sort. Is it Dave's Bench? Is that what we call it? I think it's Dave's Bench. So that's a nice place to take a sit along your hike. And Bob's Way is also going to wind up being the southernmost portion of a conservation project that BNRC is currently working on, where by way of conserving about 800 acres, those 800 acres will fully connect 14,000 acres in this area. So it's a really great place to be in the outdoors and enjoy nature in all of its glory.
Thanks, Rich. Now we have Hollow Fields, which is in Richmond, and it's almost 700 acres. This includes 5 miles of marked trails with varying kinds of habitat. As you see in this top photo here, there's that open field kind of habitat, and then a more traditional woodland trail that goes up to Perry's Peak. Without having to do much work, you can see expansive views of Yoken Ridge, or you can go all the way up Perry's Peak and see even more expansive views. So lovely reserve. Please note that unlike our other reserves, which are open from dawn to dusk, Hollow Fields is open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Charlie, I'll just interject here. I'm sorry, that actually was lifted. So
sorry. False alarm. That's good news. So yeah, this is a really popular reserve, which means that it can get a full lot on the weekends. So be sure to have a backup hike just in case that's the case. A little shout out to BNRC's Berkshire Trails app, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. It's a great tool to find nearby hikes.
So next up is Alfred Springs in Alford. It is my favorite BNRC reserve for very personal reasons. Some number of years ago, I was enjoying Alfred Springs before I was a BNRC employee. And I thought to myself, maybe I'll try and catch on with these folks one day. So that's one of the reasons that Alfred Springs is special to me. Alfred Springs is 899 acres. And there are 7 miles of trail in there. We rate the trails at Alfred Springs from moderate to difficult. There's a fair amount of elevation change, and the trails are longer at Alfred Springs. So that's why we get the moderate to difficult rating. There are 3 different trailheads at Alfred Springs, 2 of them more toward the south that are somewhat close together. And then there's a 3rd trailhead further north that if you're traveling by car, you would actually travel quite a ways away on different roads to get up to the northern trailhead. So only 2 of the trailheads are 4-season access. So that would be to the south, you have the Father Loop trailhead, and to the north, you have the Saddle trailhead. Those are the 2 4-season access. So during the winter, those are the ones that you want to use. And if road conditions are iffy, use the northern one, use the Saddle Trail. Because that's going to be your best way to get into the reserve. Alfred Springs has views of the Taconic Range and views of Tomball Mountain to the east. which is another place where BNRC and its partners have done a lot of conservation work recently. And there's a place on the Father Loop where on a nice day, you can see all the way from Alford to Mount Greylock, and you can just make out Mount Greylock in the distance. So that's a treat. So we have sections of mountain laurel. There's coniferous and evergreen trees. You can find some stone walls kicking around in Alford Springs. And this is a place that has great cross-country skiing potential, but the changes in elevation make it more challenging. So be aware of that if you're a cross-country skier. But I really love this reserve. And if you want to travel to the Southern Berkshires, or if you live in the Southern Berkshires and you want a big woods experience on longer trails, Alford Springs is a great spot.
Thanks, Rich. So now moving on to the Boulders Reserve, primarily within the city limits of Pittsfield, also touching on a little bit of Lanesboro and Dalton. Say this might be my favorite BNRC reserve, mostly because of what I just told you. It's 645 acres, primarily within the city limits of Pittsfield. Really special. There's 6 miles of trails here, ranging from easy to moderate, all sorts of different connections to create smaller loops, larger loops, different out and backs. You could visit and probably go a different route a number of times. There are some great glacial rock deposits, hence the name of the reserve, the Boulders. The highest point in the reserve, you'll see at the top left picture here, are some really dramatic boulders with a bit of a vista. You're, I think, much better vista viewpoint in the winter time with all of the leaves down than you would find in other seasons, but definitely worth it in all seasons. There are a number of different streams. There's a great pond, a beaver wetland that I think gets larger and larger every time I visit, and a pretty diverse forest structure. There had been some previous habitat management going on in there prior to BNRC's acquisition of this reserve. So you get to see some younger forest, some older forest, really kind of fun as you walk through the different trails. There's also a lot of different snags along trails, and those are dead standing trees, which make great habitat for owls, birds, tons of woodpecker activity. So keep an eye out for that when you're there. Again, another good cross-country ski area. I think folks mostly prefer the red loop. It's kind of the internal big loop opportunity at the Boulders. With a little bit of elevation change, nothing like Alford Springs, but definitely more than Steeple Top. And there are 2 trailheads, one in Dalton on Gulf Road across from the Appalachian Trail parking area, and the other is across from Hubbard Avenue in Pittsfield next to the new Taco Bell. Yeah, so put Boulders on your list for sure. And the last thing I'll mention, just because I see the owl picture, is so many folks go to the Boulders and let us know that they have seen a barred owl. So keep your eyes out. All right, so I believe we're moving on now to other ideas. And I think I'm up first with the CHP walking trail. This trail is located in Great Barrington at the CHP headquarters. Off of Route 7 in Great Barrington, the community health programs. It's very close to BNRC's Housatonic Flats, if you're familiar with that. It also has connections to the 3 Mile Hill Trail that you can access from Berkshire South Community Center. And this trail is, the CHP walking loop is it's 3/4 of a mile through a field and forested loop with a ton of beaver activity. Very active beavers, I should say, and again has some great connections to do a longer route. We like to highlight this because it isn't a super well-known trail, and it's something you could get in, during your lunch hour or after work. So something to definitely check out if you haven't been there before. The other thing I guess I would like to call out is the town of Great Barrington recently moved forward with a connection from the basically the Barrington Brewery area all the way to CHP. So there are opportunities to make a giant loop connecting the 3-mile hill trail at Berkshire South all the way to CHP, to the brewery, and then to sidewalks from there to get back to your car at Berkshire South. So just passing that information along.
All right, next up is Stedman Pond. I believe the trailhead is in Monterey. I think the acreage might squeak into Tyringham because this is very close to the Monterey-Tyringham line. The trailhead is, at least. And Stedman Pond is also part of the 14,000 conservation acres that'll be connected out that way, hopefully before the end of the winter here. So Stedman Pond, that reserve itself is 790 acres, and it is a very quick 0.2 mile walk from the parking area down to the pond. So this is a good place if you're looking for a place where you can park and then get down to the main feature relatively quickly, maybe because you want to have a winter picnic, or maybe because you want to do some plein air painting. This is good reasons to come to Stedman Pond. There's also a very beautiful sloping hill backdrop to Stedman Pond, which is great for painting and photography and things of that sort. If you are somebody who feels really comfortable self-navigating without marked trails, there's plenty of space to explore in the woods around the pond. So that's another good thing to do at Stedman Pond too. If you visit Stedman Pond in winter and you want to get out on the ice, just remember, as a general rule of thumb, that 5 inches of ice thickness will keep you safe. There's a culvert where there's a little bit of moving water at Stedman Pond, so be aware of that with respect to ice thickness. Some people will say 4 inches of ice is okay. I just like to say 5 because it's easy for me to remember that 5 will keep you alive. But in any case, enjoy your time out there near the water in the winter. It's a beautifully quiet time to be near water during the course of the year, I think. I love Stedman Pond.
The Clam River Reserve. It's all the way down in Sandusfield, but in my opinion, that just adds to its backcountry feel, and it's well worth the commute if you live up in Pittsfield. It's 550 acres with over 4 miles of trails, much of which, as the name suggests, runs along the Clam River. There are a lot of really cool intact cellar holes and stone walls. I think that this was kind of a hotspot for charcoaling in the past. So lots of interesting history. And there's also excellent porcupine habitat. So be sure to look for signs of porcupines with the towering white pines and lots of hemlock, which is particularly beautiful weighed down by snow, as I'm sure you all know. Note that there are 2 trailheads, one at the Sandusfield Town Hall, but the Hammertown Road trailhead is not accessible in the winter. I'm leading a hike here in a couple of weeks, so I'll give some more info on that later, but a good opportunity to check this out with some like-minded folks.
Yeah, are we also doing an owl thing soon?
Yeah, that's at the Boulders in a couple of weeks, and super exciting, lots of overwhelming interest. So we don't have any more spots, unfortunately.
Fully subscribed. All right. So those are some of the ones that, some of the reserves that we wanted to highlight for you. We wonder if you have any other personal favorites that you wanted to share with the group. I think we're doing this on webinar format. So if you do, the best thing for you to do is to pop those in the chat. It would be fun to see if you have other favorites that Mariah and Charlotte and I might have missed in going through places to get outdoors in the winter. Oh yeah, Stevens Glen is great. What I like about Stevens Glen, for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's in West Stockbridge, and there's a big gorge waterfall in Stevens Glen that you can get to really without much effort. It's maybe a 10-minute walk into the woods. So for the amount of effort that you put in, you get an outsized reward at Stevens Glen.
I saw a note
Widow
about
White.
yeah. Yeah,
It's a
Widow
good one.
White, a BNRC reserve in Lanesboro that doesn't have any marked trails, though there are a decent network of logging roads. Definitely worth checking out. Carroll Road, I love walking Hillsdale at Rojan Park. I love Rojan Park too. That's in Hillsdale, New York. Nice loop, good views in the winter. Yeah, absolutely beautiful place to visit. Nice. Jim also put in Constitution Hill. Yeah, Constitution Hill is a great location, also in Lanesboro.
All right. So good ideas. Thanks for sharing those. I'll have to check out the Rojan Loop because I don't live that far from there, but I haven't been on that loop. All in all, there's 58 BNRC reserves that you can explore, which are free thanks to donors who make it possible. Basically, BNRC's almost all of its revenue is donated revenue. So without donors, none of this exists. So thank you to the donors. And thank you to the volunteers as well, because there are 58 reserves that BNRC has that are free and open to the public, and over 100 other properties that it cares for that are under some form of conservation restriction. And BNRC alone doesn't have the staff to get to all of those as quickly as would need be to manage them. So all of the volunteers, scores of volunteers, help make that happen. And the whole endeavor would be sunk without volunteers. So thanks to the volunteers as well. There's this great resource page on the BNRC website, bnrc.org/learn, where you can check out links to field guides and books, links to documentaries, links to apps and websites, and there are regional and county paper maps for purchase if you would like to check those out. And of course, the BNRC Berkshire Trails app, which you can download either for your iPhone or for your Android, is totally free, also thanks to donors. And that's a great way to have not only all of the BNRC reserves at your fingertips, but there are other organizations in the Berkshires that also have trails that have those trails on the BNRC Berkshire Trails app as well. So you'll find that you're never far from a place to get outside for free to enjoy yourself in any season with the BNRC app. And there's a little picture of what the app looks like. And again, thank you to donors for making it possible, because all these spots on the app are here because of donors and volunteers. So thanks for your support, and use these resources. They're great resources.
Great. I saw a question come into the chat. Are most of the trails snow covered now on the north side of the county? Any thoughts on that?
I was looking at the weather today in North Adams, and they're definitely getting a lot more snow than down in South County. So good time to check out the Hoosick Range, perhaps.
Absolutely. Since we have some more time, we thought it might be fun to just kind of chat about what to bring. In the beginning, you all mentioned some really great reasons to be outside in winter time. Although there are tons of good reasons, it's also really important that you stay safe while being outside in winter. So some of the essentials we recommend bringing is a day pack, of course, to put all the things that you need to bring with you in. Water, it's hard to drink water when it's cold outside, but it is incredibly necessary. We like to recommend 2 or more liters of water. Some considerations for preventing it to freeze could include insulating covers for your water bottle or wrapping your extra layers around them to prevent it from freezing. Another thing I learned recently is, as long as your water bottle is watertight, flipping it upside down inside your pack so the spout that it comes out of doesn't freeze. Snacks and or meals are incredibly important. High protein and high calorie items are best. Sturdy footwear, absolutely. We recommend having more of a stiff boot. It's ideal because walking on snow and ice can be a little tricky. And those also work best if you are putting on snowshoes or micro spikes. Which brings us to our next essential, our traction devices. Snowshoes can be really helpful, micro spikes, of course. Those are the additions you can add over your shoes. They're a little more aggressive than the yak track, which is kind of more of a, I guess, a spiraled coil that I think helps more if you're, walking on a street or something like that. Micro spikes are meant to be a little more aggressive and to really support you when you're going over those sections of ice that you often run into in the wintertime in the Berkshires. Proper clothing, probably one of the most important things. Layering is great. You can always take off layers, but can't add them if you don't have them. So wool and synthetics are often a better choice than cotton. Having a base layer, an insulating layer, and then a shell layer. So something that, if it is going to precipitate, will not allow that to penetrate into your body. Oh, I love that. Susan just put in something very smart, something we learned in our CPR and first aid training recently. Be bold and start cold. You can always add more layers on, but you don't want to start your hike off getting all sweaty. So keep that statement in mind. Be bold, start cold. The next thing to consider, map and compass, not to rely on your phone necessarily for those things, because the battery gets sucked down a lot more quickly in the wintertime. All BNRC trails that we talked about today do have kiosks with trail maps that are stocked by staff and volunteers, so you can definitely rely on picking one of those up at the trailhead. They're also available online to download. And next, first aid supplies. We will be sending a follow-up email and send a summary of some basic first aid supplies to have on hand. Sunblock is one we like to call out because it's often kind of surprising to see that as a need in the wintertime, but with snow on the ground, the sun can reflect and you can get burnt. And last but not least is having some sort of light, a headlamp, flashlight, and some extra batteries, just because we don't have as much daylight. If you happen to take a little bit longer on your hike, it's nice to have that security. And then next, we've got some handy additional items I'll just briefly mention. A mobile device, again, don't rely on it for navigation, but it's nice to have if you have a favorite app, and of course for your camera. Binoculars, you can often see some really nice things in the wintertime, and again, we already talked about you can see a lot farther, so binoculars can help. Field guides, trekking poles. I might even move trekking poles over to essentials, especially if there's a lot of snow or ice on the ground. They really just help with stability and also take a lot of weight off of your knees and puts it onto your arms, so you're distributing that out a little bit more. Hand and foot warmers for you and your companions is not mentioned on here in particular, but I think is something that I often forget. I try to be tough about it, and sometimes you just need that support, and that's quite all right. A journal can be fun to have, or a book. Gaiters, not sure if you're familiar with gaiters. They're these basically coverings that you can extend over your heel, the heel of your boot, and they usually go up just below your ankle, your knee, or above your ankle. You can get different sizes, but they can really help just keep you dry. Folks even use them throughout the year for tick prevention as well. The dog can be a handy additional, sometimes the opposite if it's my dog. And one of the things that I'll also send a link to is the Mass Wildlife Tracking Card. It's free to download, to have on your phone, or to print and laminate. That's what I like to do with them. And BNRC, I think, also has a number of them in-house, so you can always contact us. We're happy to send that out to you. But that can just help you identify what tracks you're seeing in the wintertime. Rich and Charlotte, did I miss anything? Anything you want to share? Or folks, feel free to put something into the chat if you think, if you have something to add.
One thing that I really enjoy using that I want to emphasize is not an essential because it costs a little bit of money, but I really enjoy a GPS satellite device. It's a great way of keeping track of where I'm at, and I can always follow my way out on the GPS device. Like, we're talking about being on blazed trails here, so you'll always have the trail blaze to get you out. But I enjoy using the GPS device to set waypoints and mark things that I find and things of that sort. Not an essential, but something that I definitely have a lot of fun with out there. Oh, and I see we have a question. Sharon asked, how do you keep the exposed part of water pack from not freezing?
Yeah, if you're wearing one of them that has the nozzle that comes out, is that what you're referencing, Sharon? Feel free to input into the chat, yes or no. What are those called? Why am I blanking on that? Nope. Oh, water bladder. Yeah, that is what I was thinking. Sometimes it's not it's difficult to prevent something like that being external on your pack from freezing. I have seen a lot of folks, because it's usually the nozzle that you're drinking out of that freezes, kind of tuck it underneath something while they're wearing it on their pack. If they can tuck it under their jacket or something like that, it can support that. But because it's external, it's kind of hard to keep it insulated. Hopefully that tip helps a little bit.
I've heard that there are specific kind of layers, or I'm blanking on the word, but something that you can like fit around it, like a skin, to keep it warm.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. Thanks for asking, Sharon.
And what to look for in the winter. So the environment can be more bare in the winter, but in my opinion, that means there's just more opportunity to slow down and notice the details. Signs of animals are super fun to look for in the winter and can be easy to find, especially if there's snow on the ground. So fingers crossed that we get some tonight and tomorrow. Animal tracks in particular are easy to see in the snow and can reveal so much about animal behavior. If anyone has a guess as to what animal track is in the upper left corner picture, you can enter it into the chat and then I'll tell you the answer in a couple minutes. A clue is that Mariah mentioned this animal a little bit earlier tonight. And animal scat, a fancy term for animal poop. That's an easy animal sign to look for. Bobcats and coyotes in particular will often strategically place their scat in prominent spots. So in the middle of the trail, that's typical of a coyote, or on top of a rock or log. The same is true of their urine, which can be very visible again in the snow. I know there's a way to like differentiate urine if you're bold enough to take a sniff. And then we got woodpecker holes, so those what are known as snags, old trees. You can often see signs of animals in them. Pileated woodpeckers make the largest cavities, as you can see in the far right picture, and you'll often see evidence of their work on the ground, lots of wood chips, piles of wood chips. Let's see what else. We have ice patterns. So especially with the freeze and thaw cycles, ice can be beautiful and come in many different forms. Of course, remember to appreciate it from a distance if there aren't those 5 inches of ice to safely walk out on. Something I've seen recently with the thaw and freeze cycles is needle ice, which points up out of the ground. It's kind of fun to walk on, add some crunch. And some people have mentioned this in the chat tonight as their favorite thing about winter: extended views. This is particularly true on the Hoosick Range Trail, I've noticed, since a lot of it is ridgeline. In the summer, you can't see those amazing views, but in the winter with the bare trees, it's like all throughout the hike. If you take a look, there's wonderful views. And bark and buds. Trees can be a challenge to identify in the winter, but if you use the right clues and pay attention to those details, it's really a fun challenge. And onto the next slide and related to that last bit, there's a winter tree identification hike coming up, and this was rescheduled, so there are a couple open slots. That's on Saturday, January 28th. As I mentioned earlier, there's the sunset hike at Clam River on Valentine's Day, and that's in Sandusfield. And then super exciting, we have a webinar in February coming up with Sally Nazer. She is an expert trail camera person, and that's definitely worth coming to. And then there's a self-guided installation that will be up at the boulders talking about wildlife signs and tree bark. And you can visit that at any point between February and February 4th and March 5th.
All right, thanks so much, Charlotte. So now we'll just spend some time opening it up to questions. I think I saw one come in already, but just wanted to put it out there. If any of you participants have any questions for us related to what we discussed or otherwise, feel free to input them into the chat or raise your hand. We can undo the setting and allow you to speak for yourself if you'd like to. Charlotte, there was a question for you. Robin asked, what was eating the leaf in the bottom photo on the previous slide? So I'm gonna go back.
You know, I might need some help from the crowd on this. Some kind of insect for sure. I really should have done my homework given that I put this photo up, but I'm not, it could have been so many different kinds of insects. I know it looks like this is an oak tree, and there are lots of insects and galls that insects that make their homes on oak trees. So it's possible that there was an insect gall, and then when it emerged from the gall, it started to chew on the leaf. But I noticed that the marks are really round, so that could be a clue as to what insect. But open to your input, Mariah.
I think you covered it very well.
Okay.
I know an expert who could answer the question, Charlie Eisman, who's been an expert leader for us in the past, but I myself don't know. But the other question about this deck is, whose scat is that?
Yeah, so my guess is a coyote. It has a lot of hair in it. I'm kind of torn between a coyote and a bobcat, but it looks like it has those pointed ends, which is signature of a coyote.
Absolutely. I would tend to agree with you in that statement. I know that often the bobcats are more blunt and segmented. On that note, I'll just put a plug in for tomorrow night. The Berkshire Environmental Action Team is hosting an event at the Berkshire Community College. I am blanking on the speaker's name at this time. I believe Dan something. But he's an expert wildlife, I think, tracker and just general naturalist, and doing a great talk that I believe is free or with a donation to get into the talk tomorrow night. I believe it starts at 6, maybe. I'll send an email tomorrow. I'll include that in the email follow-up. Jim, it looked like maybe you were asking to talk. Maybe my computer was doing something funky, but if anyone is interested in asking a question, feel free to just raise your hand by using the raise hand function. Oh, great. Susan shared the BCC program does begin at 6 p.m. tomorrow, so looks very exciting.
Before you bring Jim up, I think we just have to recognize that Robin wins the Eagle Eye Award for the evening.
Yes. Absolutely. Thanks for that. All right.
Oh, I never said what the track was. Everyone got it right. It looks like it was an otter slide. And I learned something recently that otters have been seen repeatedly going down hills, presumably just for fun. I love that.
I would want to be an otter for sure.
Also talking about eagle eye, I'm just remembering that another great thing that you can look for is deers will be dropping their antlers. And
Mhm.
so if you've got an eagle eye, you might be able to take home a couple of deer antlers, which is
Dogs,
a fun
do-
prize. Yeah, yeah, dogs are
dogs
good, right?
help.
Exactly. Yeah,
I was walking a dog the other day and he found one. It was exciting, but I felt like I couldn't fully take claim over it.
Maybe moose if you're really lucky.
yeah, exactly. That'd be quite the prize.
Yeah. Rich, there's a question in the chat for you. If you could comment on the progress of Tomball mountain trails.
Yeah, what I can say at this point is that there, as some people may know, there is now about 1,000 acres of connected conservation land atop the spine and going down the hillsides of Tomball Mountain, starting in Great Barrington and going northward into West Stockbridge. BNRC plans to open hiking trails on the mountain, and an acquisition has recently taken place to start working toward creating some public access on Tomball in the manner that you might see at Alfred Springs or Hoosick Range or something like that. But the plans are in formation, so all I can say is that I'm hopeful that public news will be coming out about the plans sometime this summer. And the reason I'm not saying more is not because there's any big secrets, it's just because some things are in flux. And I don't want to say one thing and then have another thing come out to be true. But you know, getting people access to Tomball is among the top priorities for BNRC's land conservation, land stewardship team, which is the team that helps create and maintain the trails that we all enjoy.
Great. Thanks for that. Any last questions, folks?
I have a final comment related to the naturalist slide. I'm reading a book by Bernd Heinrich right now called The Winter World, and I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in getting a little extra boost and excitement about the winter. There's so much to appreciate out there.
Thanks, Charlotte. All right, well, I'll just say thank you all for joining us this evening. Please keep an eye out for that follow-up email. We'll send this recording as well as kind of a summary sheet with links to all the reserves we talked about, the summarized basic first aid kit, links to our upcoming events, and also the BEAT event that's taking place tomorrow. Yeah, without further ado, we'll let you get on to the rest of your evening.
All right, thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.